Good evening to everybody joining from Pakistan, and good morning and afternoon to people joining in from the West. Thanks so much for dialing in. This should be a very fun one. Before I introduce our guest, I just want to take a moment to thank Ali for organizing this week after week. I remember when I spoke to Ali and I met him for the first time 2 years ago, he was doing this alongside his day job. And I always wondered, what if Ali were to dedicate more time to this? And finally, he's getting to do that. So what a service. Thanks, Ali, for doing this. And now, for our guest today, we have Reema Khan. Reema, I will probably not do justice to your introduction, but let me still give it a shot. Reema is the founder and CEO of Green Sands. Green Sands is a boutique venture capital firm investing in technology, healthcare, space, frontier tech. It's headquartered in the Silicon Valley, but has offices across the globe. And some of the notable investments include large companies like Spotify, SpaceX, Airbnb, etc. Apart from that, since 2018, Reema has also been an ambassador to the United Nations for Women in Science and Technology. And she's also a trustee at the SETI Institute, which is substantially funded by NASA for investigating the nature of the universe and the prevalence of life beyond Earth. Very exciting stuff. So thanks so much, Reema, for taking out time for us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
In terms of housekeeping, today on the agenda we will explore Reema's journey leading up to starting Green Sands, what she's doing at Green Sands, and then we'll do a quick rapid fire. At the end of it, which we'll have a question answer session. But if you have any questions during the fireside chat, please feel free to send them to Ali, and he will post them on the chat, and I'll try to weave them in. So let's get right into it. Reema, I always like to start by learning more about the person. So I want to go back in time and understand more about your personal journey. Let's go back to when you were in college. What was going on in your mind? What did you do after? And eventually, what was the moment when you decided that you should be doing Green Sands?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually watched one of the other podcasts that you had done this way to see how people tell their story, because they really go into making it look very methodical, as if every step was strategic. And for me, it wasn't so much. I think I just went back to a fundamental desire for curiosity. I just like to be in a room with everyone else being smarter than me and doing interesting things. There are two things I admire most: curiosity and courage. And entrepreneurs seem to have both. So I wanted to be in that world. Also, the best application of science, like I'm a science nerd, I thought was, when science becomes an engineering problem, that's when it begins to get to the people and has the greatest impact. So the best place to be for that was to be in the startup ecosystem and to support founders and companies that were meaningfully changing the world in a positive way. And that just made sense to me that that's where I need to be. But it wasn't natural to me. I didn't even know very much about venture capital. I went to school on the East Coast, and East Coast, it's not such most people want to be want to work for large, finance firms and whatnot. So it was not a natural transition. I ended up getting married to somebody from here and ended up moving to the Bay Area. And was my introduction to it. The thing I tell a lot of people, and it's true, that even if you're in the US, when you come from New York City to the San Francisco Bay Area and you go for a drive and you see LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, you see all these big companies, everything you use every day, but now you see it, like physically see where they're building this stuff. It kind of gets you. It's really amazing. So I figured you don't go to an apple orchard and try to make orange juice. It's like, forget what I used to do before. This is what I want to do. Then honestly, the reason I started Green Sands, though, was even more basic. I mean, yes, of course, philosophically, those were the reasons, but and maybe there are some other women on this who would appreciate this. When you have children and whatnot, you sometimes have a career gap, right? You have time where you learned a lot because you're still learning, you're reading, you're talking to people, but you have a break. And then when you want to go back, you know a lot more, but at the same time, it doesn't show. So I thought, who's going to give me a job? Might as well just start something on my own. And that was it. And I think the most valuable thing in this age of information is perspective. And I thought I had a little bit of that on the world. And I kind of wanted to shape it in the way I thought was a good idea. And so I think that's a little bit different about how I structured Green Sands, was that I'm not someone who just says, I want to support founders at all costs. Founders are amazing, and it's all about founders. And everyone in the Valley and in the venture capital community says that. I actually say I have a vision for the world, and people who are aligned with that vision are trying to build towards that future. I would love to support them and to have them support me.
That's a very interesting idea that you had a vision for the world as opposed to seeking, founders that have a vision for the world. I will dive into a bit more of that later. I want to probe on this. I have a vision for the world, and then I want to fund people that are building towards that. How did you make the choice on executing on that vision yourself? So going the founder route as opposed to going the investor route. Was there anything that was ever pulling you to be a founder versus to be an investor?
It's interesting. An investor is also a founder if you start your own fund. So, and even a fund is a startup at one point, because you're running an organization that didn't exist. You made it come to life. So Green Sands Equity itself is a startup that invests in startups, except my business was to raise the capital and then to invest. But I have to say, like, even before that, I also had a failed startup, and that's how you start. So I started with, again, very much value and mission-driven kind of thinking. When I grew up in America, where it was very welcoming to you, no matter what your background was, I really didn't feel any discrimination or any prejudice at all. In fact, if anything, I found a lot of people completely mesmerized and excited about, like, oh, where are you from? What is your world like? So it was really great. At least that was my experience. But I realized that, what was happening since 9/11 and whatnot was the world was changing, right? And so I wanted my kids to have a better world. And so I started a company called Fundeca, and it was supposed to be fund, entertainment, cinema, arts. The idea was around neuroscience thesis that you can't change minds by just giving people facts. You actually, the part of the brain that records your memories of actual experiences is what makes us subconscious. And that subconscious is basically what controls all our prejudices, not information. So it's memory based. So the way that you can change someone's subconscious is by storytelling, by video games, movies, all of that. Because when you watch a movie or play a video game, it feels like an experience. So that also gets recorded in the same part of the brain as memories. So I thought, well, I obviously should be investing in that to try to change people's minds. It was a very hard thing to do in Hollywood, where, it was at that time in 2013 or something, was a very difficult place because it was all the big guys. So anyway, I had some success with it, worked with the State Department, so spun it off as an idea to them for soft diplomacy, but didn't make any money in that company. But I learned through it, like, how hard fundraising was, how to tell the story, but at the same time, how whatever little success I had, how I got that. So that was a good experience. And then after that, I just ended up just launching the fund.
Very cool. Interesting to hear that you had a failed startup and then you transitioned into being an investor. Was the transition in any way unique or difficult? Because what I hear is from the people that I know that went from being founders to the venture side of things, that the transition is always interesting. It's not easy to go from being very hands-on doing stuff yourself to now suddenly being hands-off because you're not running the show, somebody else is.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't, because I actually, like, doing the startup was the different part. Before that, I had a background which was very much traditional finance on Wall Street. So I knew how to analyze companies and business plans, and, read the financial statements, and also think of, what works and what not. But beyond that, like, at a higher level, understanding what the world needs and where will this fit, and is this going to work? So I had that bigger perspective. So I thought that doing this startup was basically just rolling up my sleeves and trying to do something. And it was more, like I said, it was more about doing it for the sake of my kids and the community or whatever it was. But no, I didn't find that to be at all difficult. In fact, I felt more comfortable being an investor than I had as a founder. But the point is that I did experience both sides.
Cool. So let's talk more about the fund. I mean, if you had to tell us about Green Sand in a couple of minutes, what is the thesis? What do you invest in? What geographies are in focus? And what's the right stage of investment for you?
So look, I mean, my general thesis about the world is that the only way we're going to understand the world we live in is by expanding our perspective, by looking at it from many different angles. So I wanted to have an investment thesis that included very diverse ways of looking at the world. So we literally very diverse, like space, right? That's very far away up there. And you look at your own world. I fundamentally believe that the technology you develop, because of every thought and every idea comes in some sort of a casing, right? Um, Even when you develop, well, for example, when you develop technologies for space, that itself comes with its own mindset, and that determines how you're going to build, what kind of ideas are going to come out of it, what kind of, I guess, point of view or prejudice or bias you might have that comes out through that, right? Or a positive one too. So I felt space was a good one. And then, so it's very simple. Look, we invest in anything data related, hardware and software, because data is the digital twin of humanity, and we all know that. We invest in space because we think that is the next frontier. It's like no country would fathom not having an air force, right? And so this is the next level after that. So it's going to be something that's important. I do believe in a future where a lot of the infrastructure for Earth will move outside the biosphere because of climate and political reasons and whatnot. And then, so it was space and it was technology and health, because no matter what we do, didn't COVID tell us this? Like, it doesn't matter how smart we are and what we do. If we're dead, we're dead. So human beings need to live long, healthy lives. And in all ways, mental health, physical health, and our healthcare systems. So, this is the body we've been given. This is how we experience the world. So you got to take care of it. And then finally, everyone, I think, has an obligation, literally a moral obligation, to invest a little bit in things that don't work yet. In frontier tech or deep tech, because that's how you do knowledge creation. Making the world more efficient is not what I want to do alone. Because think about it, if you make the world more efficient, what happens? You have more time. Well, what do you do with that time? You try to understand your world, you try to build new things. So I felt that I wanted to definitely do some of that. I don't want to miss out on the birth of the internet. So we do invest in quantum computing, brain-computer interface, and now also in nuclear energy.
Very cool. And is there something that you stay away from? This is an interesting question because over time you're looking at such a broad space, so many exciting things. Have you over time discovered that there are certain spaces that are maybe not as exciting for you or not as investable for you?
I mean, I don't know about the investable part. As anything that makes sense to me and I understand, I can do. But what do I enjoy investing in? Because I'm not doing it just to. You can make money doing anything, right? If you do it well. So it's a matter of what do you like to do. And I guess I'm not really interested in when people send me like beauty startups or I don't know, real estate. Not that interested in that kind of stuff. And not interested in I mean B2C is okay sometimes, but right now for this is our second fund. It's 500 million. It's a little bigger than our last one. Last one we did do B2C, but this one we're trying to do more B2B, so more enterprise. So we try not to do too much of that because I think in this economy right now, there can only be very few winners in that space. So those we kind of stay away from. I'm not huge on cybersecurity. I let other people do it. Yeah. So I don't know. Like this, we do what we do, and we try not to do anything else for now.
Very clear, very clear.
And
And
we have
then are you
partner,
investing?
right?
Sorry, go ahead.
Partner. Oh, it's okay. Sorry. And each partner leads a certain vertical, right? So I am the founder and I sit at the top of it. But at the same time, I have someone, my partner, Davide Venturelli, he heads up the quantum computing area. He has a PhD in quantum physics. Then we have Helmi Altuki. He leads our healthcare. He's got a PhD from Stanford in electrical engineering. And then he did a postdoc in genomics. He built a multi-billion-dollar startup that's now public. It went to 17 billion public at one point. So having people who are experts in these fields is the reason founders come to us.
Here, and then in terms of geography, are you mostly focused on the US? So are you mostly finding that in these areas you're seeing the best deal from the Valley,
And
or
you
are
were
you more
asking me,
agnostic across the world?
I would love to say I'm agnostic, but the fact of the matter is we do also have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors, because of which I have to have boots on the ground or know the place and know the people and the ecosystem, so that because the problem is it's not just about making money, it's also making sure that you can help the companies you invest in. So if we have the ability to help them beyond the dollars, then we invest in them. So I have invested in Korea, South Korea. I've invested in China, which didn't go very well because of China US needy. Um, I've invested in Sweden. So, well, we've invested in a lot of countries' startups, but usually we like a startup. It doesn't matter where it starts, but as long as, like, even if it starts out of Pakistan, but as long as a company has the ambition or the ability to sell to the US market, as for part of it, we will take a look at you because we know this market the best, and then we can help you.
Cool. And then I want to understand in terms of the focus area, you find a lot of the stuff is deep tech, right? Is there a timing angle to it? Right? We had the personal computers moment, and we had the internet moment, and we had the mobile moment, we had the cloud moment. It feels like now is the deep tech moment, personally to me, but I want to understand from your point of view, is there a timing thing to it, or do you think it's been the deep tech moment for a while and nobody's just woken up to it?
I mean, I think it's always been deep tech moment. I mean, I don't know about moments that way. What I'm trying to say is that I don't think we should have ever given up on it. But I agree that nowadays people are much more open-minded to these, what they would used to call science experiments, because they've seen a few of these come around, right? So I do feel that, yes, maybe you're right, that it is the deep tech moment. But all I can say is that it should always be a deep tech moment. I don't know. Why wouldn't be investing in innovation and invention, right? You have to. So it definitely is. I mean, think about your PC, right? Like, compared to that, a 30 qubit quantum computer would equal the processing power of a conventional computer that would run for 10 teraflops, trillions of floating points, right? Of operations per second. Today's typical desktop computers run at a speed measured at like gigaflops, imagine, right? And I'm talking about teraflops. So quantum computing is going to change the world. So how could you not have that on your horizon and invest in it? Um, and it's no longer a science problem; it's an engineering problem. And engineers, when it comes to them, they figure stuff out. So it's getting there.
And where do you think this innovation is coming from in terms of the kind of people that are doing it? I was recently looking at the source of innovation in the world. And it's very interesting to see that a lot of it for the last 30 years has been coming from startups that are VC-backed.
Mhm.
But now, for deep tech particularly, what we're seeing is that a lot of it is coming out of universities, where you have professors, labs that are going after these problems, patenting them. Then eventually somebody's buying out those patents and commercializing those technologies. And then the third is kind of incumbents that are large corporations where innovation has never really traditionally come from. But we're starting to see some of that for deep tech as well. So in terms of people that are the source of these innovations, where do you think it's coming from?
It's a really good question, and I can relate a story that I recently experienced something that really blew my mind and made me really happy. I do all kinds of things, right? So in addition to the resume that you read, I'm involved in this community called World Minds, and I'm just an infinitely curious person. And so I'm also part of this thing called Lindau Nobel Laureate meetings. So basically, all living Nobel laureates come together once a year, and given the subject, whichever the subject is for the topic is for that year, and also scientists are invited from. I was waiting for this moment to ask a question because I have a Pakistan angle in this. So I went to this meeting, and it was a physics meeting this year. It was on July 1st to 5th, and it's in Lindau, Germany. And 36 Nobel laureates were there. And all the physics Nobel laureates were there that are alive, right? And there was a girl from Faisalabad who was there, and she had a PhD in physics. And I think there were I think two Pakistanis there. And this girl was from Faisalabad. She's a professor at some university there. And she told me that out of 1,000 people, only two get invited. And the way you get invited to this meeting is, that the countess of that island, she comes in, gives a speech. She's a cousin of the king of Sweden, I think. And she says, there are only two ways to get invited to this meeting. The first time you get invited because you put in an application, you have to have enough publications, enough research that really is important and significant in the field. And then you apply and then you get accepted. The second time you get to come if you win a Nobel Prize. So you only get to come to this once in your life. And this girl, she's wearing this dupatta on her head. She's wearing, simple clothes, and she knew her stuff. And I was so proud of her. And I was also really proud when some of the Nobel laureates, when they were talking about it, about nuclear energy and whatnot, they actually talked about Abdus Salam, and I was like, there we go. That's because he just said, yeah, for example, the people who worked on it, like Salam, and like, oh yeah, that's another one of ours. So what I loved about that meeting was that this used to be previously a highly academic meeting. But now they have introduced tracks where young scientists are asked to come and present their ideas that would be for startups or for product. And why I am there now is because some people from the business community who have been involved in this area for a little while are invited to be part of it. So I do think that now when Nobel laureates who are so traditional and Nobel community that is so conservative, if they're opening up to founders and startup people, that means the world's going to change. So yeah, absolutely. I think the centers of innovation are changing. It's going to be the nerdy university, students, professors. It's going to be founders all over the world. And not knowledge is not I also another thing I do is I endow postdocs sometimes. So I'm endowing a postdoc at MIT. So I pay for someone to study a topic that I don't have time to study, renting space in someone's mind who's really smart. What I'm finding is that sometimes people who actually do an amazing job at this don't even have PhDs, some of them. They're just people who learned this on their own. So I would say don't be discouraged. I mean, if this girl from Faisalabad was there, blowing my mind and everyone else's, yeah, universities in Pakistan definitely have enough people who could be innovating and be centers of innovation.
That's a fantastic story. And that was going to be my next question, because with any startup, talent is a big question mark. You're only as good as the people you can get on your team. And when I discuss this with some of the people that I know, what is it going to take for deep tech to start coming out of Pakistan? Talent is a big question mark. And it's not just talent, it's also an order of priorities, right? Pakistan is so nascent. There's a bunch of stuff to do before you can start being at the frontier and start exploring deep tech.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see how relevant do you think is deep tech to Pakistan? That's my question.
That's a really good question. Let me talk to you about the three areas that I invest in deep tech, right? And then tell you where I think Pakistan has a chance. And I'm not 100% sure about what the ecosystem there is. I can tell you what it takes. And I feel that, so for example, brain-computer interface is really hard. It's just really expensive. So you're not going to be able to do that in Pakistan. And yeah, the Utah array itself, it's very expensive. And basically, the way the brain-computer interface works is that you put a chip in someone's brain, literally. It's not really a chip. What it is, I remember when I first saw it at Stanford with one of our companies, Neuralink is one, and then Paradromics is another. We're investors in Paradromics. Synchron is another. So what they do is basically our brain is like a computer. So they put these threads, or think of them as very thin rods, straight into your brain, and they conduct the electrical signals, and they can read your intention. And when I mean intention, they mean volition. For example, if I'm thinking of the word good, right? So in my mind, I formulate that word and the letters, and then it can already read it. And actually, that is faster than what human beings can process. So in a world of AI, when we're so worried about computers getting smarter than us, honestly, again, I go back to the medium that you use for your technology, or your limits of your technology are the limits of your performance, right? So the human mind, because of the fact that we have, the body has to go through all of this and it's slower, and then our body has to interact with a device, and there is a lag. That's why we're not as fast, or you have no idea how fast the human mind is. So if you had it directly connected to a computer, you have no idea. So the fastest people to be able to speak or to think and to put that out there is actually going to be the human brain, way more than even like the chat GPT that shows it in like 2 seconds. Like human mind is even faster. So that's pretty incredible stuff. But you can't do that in Pakistan because it's really expensive. However, the scientific research on it, I suppose, like theoretically, you could work on that. Quantum computing is interesting because that one, interestingly enough, while US has had the most investment from the private sector, Europe is doing pretty well in that, and so is China. China is actually really ahead. So I feel that that is a space that maybe we could do well in because there are many approaches like superconducting. Okay, that's hard, that's expensive, but ion traps, neutral atoms, photonics, those are approaches that I do think that our people could work on because quantum computing is more about people. It's about the minds you use. So I don't know what the talent is over there, but that doesn't require as much money as maybe brain computer interface companies. And then another one I was thinking of, and I don't know, again, I'm being clueless about the political climate in Pakistan, but no, aren't we a nuclear power? So another thing we could probably do is like with the need for energy that is in the world, I mean, I feel like maybe nuclear fission, not fusion, that's far out. Nuclear fission, the limits to nuclear fission are not the building the reactor. That's the easy part. You could just buy one. The harder part is the operations and then the construction and building and management of these things. And if we could have more efficiencies in that with innovation, and we're really good at doing things like that, maybe that could be useful for the world because that's a model. And if you could make that more efficient with efficiency gains, that could be used all over the world. I don't know. So those are the deep tech areas I invest in, but I'm sure there are many others that could be placed for Pakistan.
And it's interesting that you mentioned nuclear for energy. And energy is a big, big topic, especially after the geopolitical climate in the last couple of years. People have woken up to the importance of energy independence and just the need for energy solutions generally for climate change reasons. Is energy tech something that you look at as part of the fund, or is
Yeah,
that out
we're
of scope?
beginning to now, but it's funny because my firm's name is Green Sands Equity, so most people think it's green tech or green energy. We haven't never done that. But we are we are looking at it because it's part of the data, right? Thesis. In order for you to run an LLM, like the amount of data that you're going to use, yeah, it's going to be the size of the needs of an entire city of Los Angeles or something. So you definitely have an energy shortage. And that's a space that complements that thesis. So we do invest in it. Yeah.
Cool. I want to shift gears a bit to, and it aligns with some of the questions we're getting as well, is I want to understand your investment style. And broadly, there are only a core set of things that any investor looks at when they look at a startup. You look at the team, you look at the opportunity, you look at the numbers. And of course, there are nuances in terms of what stage you're looking at, whether it's early stage or late stage, and you index more on one or the other. But for you, generally, when you look at an investment, what are the set of things that you are looking for? And what I want to caveat with this is, you mentioned earlier that you have a vision for the world and you're looking for people that fit into that vision, which is very much a thesis-driven investing style, versus some investors would have a much more open mind to just not have a vision for the world, but feel founders that are building incredible things and have founder-driven investing style without any thesis at all. Which do you gravitate towards more? And then what are the set of things you look for?
What do you mean thesis-driven investment style?
As in you have a certain vision for the world. That these are the 5 things that the world needs, and then you're looking for people that fit into that, as opposed to anybody that's building anything, and you bet on the founder more.
So, I mean, it's not like I've decided that the world needs more chocolate chip cookies or something, right? So it's not so specific. It's more about the world needs innovation in certain areas about human health that needs to be taken care of. We need to be able to definitely be investing in anything data related. So, and that because that's very important. We do feel that we want to invest in deep tech, in frontier tech that's going to be very innovative for the world. And then we want to invest in the space sector. So those are our sectors. Within those sectors, any mindset, any way of thinking is welcome. So for example, let's switch gears to space for a change, right? Because it's a little different. Not a lot of VCs invest in space. So space is another place actually that Pakistan could play a part. I'll tell you how. So we invest in if I could get very specific about it, like in each sector, we have certain things that we invest growth equities. In certain areas, we invest early stage. So for example, let's just take space for example. So in space, when it comes to upstream, you talk about it almost like an oil industry thing. Upstream, which is rockets and things that go up. Those we go only for mature companies. Like SpaceX is my big investment, and I'm probably not going to invest in anything else unless because it's a monopoly. It's a good idea. It's CapEx heavy. It's got its contracts. Stick with it. Now, when it comes to space stations and satellite companies, again, very CapEx heavy. So I would rather go for a bit more mature company. We invested in Axiom Space, the only commercial space station, which is really cool. And actually, it's interesting. It's the company is actually founded and started by somebody from Iran, Kamran Ghaffarian, and he's amazing. So anyone can do anything. So he's what I'm trying to say is that was again mature company. But when it comes to downstream, and downstream is basically Earth observation, right? So that's applications of data that you get from being in space, and then what do you do with that data? Like how do you interpret it to have applications? That's a layer which is more about innovation. Like, hey, if you combine this space data with this Earth data and these insights, you can come up with solutions for when to have a sale for Nike shoes at the mall because of traffic movement, population data, their economic backgrounds, trends, weather, influences. Like you have all that. So for example, a company like Orbital Insights did that. They didn't have their own necessarily satellites or anything, but they were interpreting data that was there. So I think Pakistanis are really good at interdisciplinary thinking, I suppose, and you can use that to come up with innovative insights. So that's something that you can do without huge capex. And I could do early.
Try not to nerd about space. So let's say you're looking at an early stage startup. What are the things that are top of your mind for what you're looking for when you're making the investment?
The first thing is the founder, 100%. It's leadership, just making sure the person has integrity, has strength, and clarity of mission, and really understand a good understanding of the field that they're in, right? Like they should be experts in what they do, or be able to hire experts and build a team out, right? So it definitely starts with the founder, that they should know what they're doing, they should be passionate about it, don't give up, and pivot as needed, and be a little bit coachable, at times, because if you don't know how to use people because they should be using us, then you won't get far in life. So founder. And the second thing we look at is just the strength of the idea. I mean, does the world need it? And where will it fit in the ecosystem and in the market? And can others build on it? And then go from there. But the one thing we do that's a little bit different, I will say, in our way of thinking is that most people are looking for the unicorns to build the next unicorn. Sure, we will do a few, or a lot, I guess. But to me, some of the companies that come up with innovations and inventions that become the foundational block of future innovation are also really important. So I do invest in tools companies as well, not just, product and solution and service, all of that. So I respect those kind of founders as well, where they're saying, yeah, I know it's not going to be my product, but using what I have, so many others can be built. So we invest in that as well. So yeah, we look at the founder, we look at the idea and how it fits, and the ability to scale, and how we can help them. If I can't help them, then I shouldn't be part of their journey for them, because my job is to support them.
I'll talk more about how you help the startups just in a bit, but before we go to that, I want to understand there's a big debate about looking at TAM, right? The total size of the market when you're looking at investment, because of course, as investors, you're going for outsized returns and you need a certain size of the market. Mm-hmm. Do you look at TAM, especially from a deep tech point of view, when it's so early to even determine what the size of the opportunity will be?
Yeah, it's just kind of a fun exercise, but it's really not real, because it's hard to determine TAM. I can put in any number. Recently, I was at a space conference, and before that, I was at a quantum computing conference. And yeah, I can say the world needs so many, and this is how big it's going to be. But we're always making these assumptions of how fast the adoption will be and how good the product is going to be without any errors. The biggest issue with quantum computing is noise, right? and error correction is an issue. So, and many other things, right? So I don't know. I don't think that the TAM for deep tech is easy to determine. In fact, a lot of that is, there was talk at Lindau about like, is there a lot of hype about these areas? And some people were just sitting there saying, probably, but that's good, because that would encourage investment into the space, because you have to do impossible things. So I don't worry too much about TAM, because you will create markets. You will create markets and you will create TAMs once your product is out there. So I think for deep tech, it's hard to determine the TAM. You just have to really believe in the strength of your product. Yeah. But yeah, you have to make some assumptions, and we make them all the time. But there's definitely a lot more hype about it. And realistically, it probably won't be that big that fast, but it'll get there.
Cool. And then now let's pivot to maybe, picking the best deals is half the game. The rest of it is then supporting those deals to become the best companies. And I really like this thing Vinod Khosla says. He says 90% of investors add no value to startups, and 70% of investors actually add negative value to startups when they're on their boards. So I want to understand, when you invest in a startup and say you join a board, how do you think about supporting that founder in their journey?
So see, that statement to me sounds a lot like predicting the TAM for deep tech, because like, I don't know, how does he know like 70% or 90%? How did he come up with those numbers? But anyway, yeah, I mean, that's just a passionate statement. But yeah, I agree to some extent, but you have to know what kind of investor you are, right? So for early stage investment, of course, it's a lot more hand-holding, and it's also a lot more risk. So for that, I agree that you have to be careful to align yourself with the right kind of investors who have the bandwidth and also the network and the ability to be able to help you. Because, I want to help you build your board. I want you to build your team. I want to open doors for you. I want you to get your first customer. All of those things. That's a lot of work. That's almost like running a company. So if you have that ability to do that, then you do that. But for us, honestly, we invest mostly in growth equity, and Series A onwards, and some things as well, which I don't know if that qualifies as growth. That's early enough to me. But we do invest in some seed stage companies, because you want to get to know them early. And then, so basically, when I say we're a growth equity investor, doesn't mean we don't invest in seed. We invest a lot of seeds, but they're smaller checks, right? And then we watch them, and then we come in big. But when we are with the company, we are with you for the life of your company, from like seed to IPO, or from seed to acquisition. So we are very, very long-term investors. So yeah, I don't know about the investors who don't add any value. I guess in a way, if you'd ask me, there are like Fidelities and like Tiger Globals of the world that are just going to come in when you don't need the money, right? Because then it's more about, you want the money, you don't want the advice. Even they are valuable in my view, because they interfere a little bit less, so you should be fine. That seems like a good statement to run for an election or something among founders. But the fact of the matter is that every investor represents a certain value in your journey, and you just have to make sure that you get the right one for your journey at the right time. And yeah, it's a choice the founders have. And honestly, for a founder, they'd rather have money than not have money if they know what they're doing and they are not too controlled by the investor. It's better to have a zero value person as long as you have the money.
Cool. I think we have about 20 minutes. So I want to do a quick rapid fire before we go to the questions from the audience. So I would shoot 5 questions at you, and then just quick responses off the top of your head. Okay. If you were not in VC, what would be the job that you would be doing?
I would be a physicist.
Cool. What's one thing you believe that you find most people don't agree with?
I mean, I guess most people don't like the idea that I say I have a vision and a view of the world, and if it fits, then I make it work. I don't necessarily chase founders. People don't like me saying that.
What's one habit that you believe has contributed to your success so far?
Oh, the skin of a rhino. I'm tough in the sense that I don't give up, and I don't take anything too personally. And I'm very driven, I suppose, and I'm excited to be alive and so grateful for it. And I'm not competitive with anyone else. I'm competitive against myself. Every year I have to be better than the last and try to add value to the world. I have no idea what other people do. And when I do know, I admire them and I look up to them, and I'm a fangirl of anybody who's doing anything amazing.
I love that answer. If you could go back in time and give young Rima any advice, what would be that one piece of advice?
Wow. I could become who I've become earlier. You wasted so much time. You know, I think the thing if you ask me what is my favorite thing about being at the age and place in my life right now, is that I now have the freedom to be a dumbass whenever I want to be. Because if you have accomplished a little bit in life, at some point you have the freedom to say, I don't know this, or I don't understand something. And the freedom to say that I don't understand things is amazing.
Cool. And where do you see yourself in the next 10 years?
Well, I see myself doing what I'm doing, but also doing a lot more in education and philanthropy. And I definitely think that I feel fundamental science research is getting a little bit sidelined because of this excitement about everything turning into a product really fast. But you have to remember that at some point, there are just so many ways that you can make new Ubers. You do have to have some fundamental innovation in this world, which comes from basic science research. So we shouldn't give up on that.
Fantastic answers, Reema. I want to pivot to some of the questions we've been getting from the audience. And I like this one because it's something that you do alongside, it's something that you do as part of Green Sense, which is a lot of policy advising. So the question we've gotten is, what do you think is the role of policy when it comes to deep tech innovation generally? And then maybe if you could comment, what do you think the role of policy would be when it comes to Pakistan and deep tech?
It's interesting, like I'm getting all these deep tech questions and I'm happy to answer them because that's my favorite of the focuses we have. But deep tech, it represents less than a quarter of what we do. The rest of it is not all deep tech. But yeah, of course. I mean, for example, when it comes to brain-computer interface and whatnot, that's a huge policy issue, right? I mean, super soldiers, all this, metahumans, all that, all those things that people think about. What are you going to do with this? The policy is what's going to can help a technology get to the world. So super important. So that's one. The other one is that I think that, for example, quantum computing, that couldn't have done well just with VC investment for sure. And that's why Microsoft and IBM and Google have been the biggest players because they have the most money. But because there's so much government funding in other countries, that's really helped a lot. So non-dilutive funding is super important. Yeah, and when I think, like, for example, we did some project with the government of South Korea where they wanted to build a smart city, and they just wanted to know all that it takes and bring the right companies in and all the right introductions. Policy has a huge role in helping innovation in both deep tech and all tech.
And what about policy when it comes to AI and energy? In the US, we've seen recently the Inflation Reduction Act, which is probably a big catalyst for a bunch of things. And then you have things like GDPR.
Yeah.
What's your take on this?
It's interesting. I can't believe we didn't talk about AI the whole time. Through the whole conversation, because everyone talks about AI. I don't even think of all of AI as deep tech anymore. I do think that AI is going to be much more regulated, even though we think it's not. It'll be much more regulated because of the guidelines and the guardrails that are being put in place in the development. But it's not going to be as bad as what happened with social media. I think it's going to be better. So I don't worry so much about it, actually. And I think we have to make our mistakes and learn in public. And maybe, actually, this sounds really bad, but not having so much policy baggage in Pakistan, you could do more with it. You have access to so much data without so many restrictions on you. Maybe you could really take it places. So there are opportunities where lack of policy can be a gift for a short window of time.
The next question is actually on AI. And it will be interesting to hear your point of view in terms of where you're investing in AI. Are you thinking about more the infrastructure layer, so the chips and then even the foundation models, Or are you thinking more about the wrapping around AI, which is more applications built on top of these models?
We've actually invested in all of it. So we have invested in hardware, in chips, and we invested in it's called inference, analog inference. That's a company that's interesting. It's similar to Mythic, but a little bit different. Definitely like hardware. We like hardware a lot. I like hardware a lot, as you can tell by quantum computers too. And then we invested in Vectara. That is basically like a tools company to be able to build smart AI models for retrieval of information. And it's basically designed by the same people who worked on Google search. So that's been amazing. We invested in a company called Synth Labs, which is a company that helps create synthetic data to train AI models for all the scenarios that haven't happened, but you want to make sure that we're ready for them. So you create fake memories in a way that are needed for LLMs to function well. It can also be a way to do kind of like security for AI by using synthetic data. So we've invested in all of them, and we believe that that is the way to go. We're not focused on just one, but hardware is getting actually like saturated very quickly. So I think that it's going to be more so on the application layer and the tools companies.
And do you think it's sort of becoming the hype cycle is there for AI right now, right? It's still, I think, 2021 for AI. Everywhere else, it's dark, but for AI, it still seems like it's 2021. And one of the things that I'm hearing from people in Pakistan is that any pictures they're seeing have an AI angle to it. It's almost become sort of a prerequisite to think about AI. Is that how you are seeing the pictures that you are getting? Is that AI having a strategy on AI?
I'm actually more wary of it. When you unnecessarily plug in AI, it's just like, come on. I'm very comfortable with doing things where I know AI doesn't yet have a very clear application. For example, in quantum computing, in error correction, sure, it's going to be helpful. And at some point, once we have quantum computers, it may or may not help. It's not clear to work better with AI. There's no real application for that. When it comes to brain-computer interface, there are some applications when it comes to interpretation of the data, the signals that we're picking up, but there isn't a lot of application of it in the hardware part of it. So we're very comfortable saying that it's not everything. But I think when people are saying AI right now, they're so focused on like generative, AI. They're not thinking about the other applications. For example, for us, a huge part of AI, one of the companies we invested in, Good Chemistry, is simulation, right? And it was actually built for quantum computers, but until the computers get here, we can use like Amazon or Google Cloud and use their data to be able to do these simulations and come up with new materials, like and do pharma research, right? And drug discovery. And the company was bought by Sandbox AQ, which is a $4 billion company now. The chairman is Eric Schmidt, so it was a good way to meet him too. And we knew when we were selling the company to them that 60% of their value is going to come from our company. And it is the biggest application. And that's AI too, but no one's talking about AI in healthcare, biotech, and innovation. I find that much more exciting. But yeah, AI is all over, but I guess it would be slightly irresponsible to not acknowledge that you're using it or not using it in this time. You should be, but at the same time, just don't throw it in there if it doesn't fit. Doesn't make sense. Like a smart investor would see it through it.
No, I totally agree with you. And also, there's a big difference between AI and generative AI. So I think point well made. The next question is about crypto. Right? This one seems to come up. What is your take on crypto?
I've been burned by crypto. I don't like crypto. Look, I mean, some people think it's like the best thing since sliced bread, and it is a great technology. First of all, I invest in quantum computing, and that's gonna like completely destroy you if it happens. Well, it's gonna take a while. Who knows when they'll come here? But quantum resistant cryptography is kind of hard, right? So I am not a fan of crypto personally, but at the same time, I do understand and appreciate the value of blockchain and systems. And I do think that Pakistan has a very good potential for crypto. As much as I don't like crypto, I think it's good for Pakistan to be able to try that. Yeah, I mean, we don't invest in it, but It's definitely, oh, you know how you asked me, like, what are some of the things you don't invest in? I don't invest in crypto. However, if something amazing happens, I am like ready to change my mind if someone impresses me. Yeah, we don't do crypto.
And do you generally stay away from fintech? That's also one of the questions.
I don't know if I generally stay away from fintech. But we haven't really, it was a crowded space for a little while, and it was overvalued space for a little while too. I talked to some crazy fintech companies in 2021. I have 5 employees, my valuation is 500 million. Okay. So I'm not against it. I'll take a look at it. In fact, I do think there's some great applications out there. We look at it, but we haven't got a history of investing a lot in it, but doesn't mean that we are averse to it.
Well, one of the questions is how do you keep a pulse on the market? Because you're working on the frontier of innovation. How do you make sure that you always know what's happening at the frontier?
Well, because we have, okay, so a big part of what we do at Green Sands on a monthly basis and on bi-weekly basis is we actually have our internal seminars where our partners actually bring together their research, because they're all like, for example, Davide is a NASA quantum computing scientist. So he will, but it doesn't mean that he only does that, right? It just means that he's smart. So then he's going to go and do research on whichever industry area, trend, technology, and come present it, and we all learn. You know, Helmi's going to do his, I'm going to do my research on space or whatnot. So we present ideas to each other. We go, so that's internal, first of all. And then beyond that, we are always in this community. And like I said, I like to be in a room where everybody's smarter than me. And so that's almost always the case. And we're always learning. So we do keep a pretty good tab on making sure that we're educated. But even then, there are times that we have no idea what someone's talking about. And then we go home and learn.
That's one of my favorite parts of being an investor. Every day you're learning from the people that are smartest in their domains. The second last question, Reema, is more about foreign direct investment. Because you have a lot of experience with it, what advice would you have for Pakistan, if any, about how they can strengthen their brand and position themselves as attractive for foreign direct investments?
That's a really good question. The problem is that, for example, there are countries, and I can't name them all because we aren't allowed, but so you know, I work with the United Nations on that. I also like with the SETI Institute, for example, right? Like we're trying to, I would love for the SETI Institute now because I'm the chairman of their endowment. We have a few $100 million now, and we are actually investing in other countries in space science and in general in science and technology partnerships, and that is something that I would love to do with Pakistan, but I haven't found a way to do it. We're already doing it with so many other countries. I mean, like, for example, just by the end of this month, Saudi Arabia is coming over. We're doing something with them. They will take us seriously, but Pakistan will not take us seriously, you know? It's like, because you're not NASA. Well, we're 90% funded by NASA. All our scientists are NASA. We just have a different name because we're a standalone and we're international rather than national space agency, you know, right? We're not belong to one country. So I think if Pakistan had more open-mindedness and less knobbiness, they would actually really benefit from it because they're so brand conscious about who's coming in and they only want to work with them or get excited about them. I think if the government was a bit more humble and more sensible, I think there are great opportunities for investment from non-dilutive and, you know, for profit. The biggest issues is like the worry about like fraud and like corruption. So that's why foreign direct investment, if it filters through any government channels, is just something that people are a little afraid to do. So I think if we remove more of those layers and make the investment more direct into the economy and into the ecosystem, I think easily, for example, like an example I gave you was with South Korea, when they said, okay, we want to build a smart city. Well, okay, bring us these data center companies, bring us these, you know, service providers that we need for all of the various aspects of building this city. So what do? We make a phone call, like, hey, you know, Tesla, do you want to open an office there? Do you want to set up a factory? Like everyone, and we go out of our way to make that happen, right? We could do that for Pakistan. There is an opportunity there, but the problem is that the layers of government that come in and that have to filter the investment, they need to get rid of some of that hierarchy. And if Pakistan really cares about its people, it should do it.
Makes sense. We can't fix everything on this call, but hopefully, just as a starting point, we can start to get you more involved because of what Ali's doing. Last question, Joanne, a very important one because it's come up multiple times. It's about how to reach you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
You can just email me. That's usually a good idea.
Oh,
I will be honest, like when I saw someone else just give out their own email, and I was like, yeah, right. Like you're really gonna respond to so many emails because it's a lot of them. I mean, I'll give you my email. It's Reema@greensandsequity.com. And but the better thing to do is if you have a startup that you're actually pitching, then send it to info@greensandsequity.com, because that means it immediately goes to a team of analysts, and it is their job to make sure that I see it in every week when they summarize all the deals that are in. And because if it comes to me, it'll probably not get picked. Like I won't read through the entire deal or look at the investment opportunity properly. But yeah, you can reach me and you can send info@greensandsequity.com. Yeah.
perfect. I will type it in the chat as well. It's info@greensandsequity.com, right?
Sorry, very long email address, because when I started, it was like $1,200 to get gse.com. So I was like, no, I'm not going to spend that. I don't have the money. And then many years later, they came back and they said it's $50,000 for gse.com because the company is doing so well. And at that point, $50,000 seemed less than 1,200 given how much we had grown. And funny enough, I chose not to because I felt that it's important to remember that we were so poor that we chose a longer address. So let's not forget how we started.
I could go on for another hour, Reema, but thank you so much for your time. I think we're just on time, and we'll call it a night. It was lovely talking to you, and I think I'm sure everybody on the call learned a lot from you. Thank you so much, everybody, for dialing in. Thank you so much, Reema.
Thank you. My pleasure. Bye-bye.